I don't think there's a crisis in manhood. I think what there is a very foolish attempt by many radicals in our society to make an association between male competence and patriarchal tyranny, which is a very, very bad idea. I met Jocko Willink. He's a good example. I mean, Willink was the commander in Ramada, I think. And, you know, you can say what you want about American military involvement. It has nothing to do with that, really. Not at this level of analysis. He's a tough guy. He told me quite straightforwardly that he was one of those kids that as an adolescent could have gone either way, right? Yeah. He could have been a highly successful street criminal.
Yeah, probably.
Right, but yeah, probably. Well, you can see it. But he decided not to do that. And, you know, he's very, I would say he's...
He was a SEAL, right?
Mm-hmm, that's right. And he's psychophysiologically intimidating. He's a big guy. You can tell he knows how to use it, and you can tell he used it.
Yeah.
But as far as I can tell, he's a good person. And that's actually, all of that capacity for mayhem is part of what makes him a good person. Yeah. And people know that. That's why they're listening to him. Yeah. And like I said, the other people I've met the men I've met who are good men, they're all like that. They're all dangerous. They're all dangerous. It would vary from person to person, but I would say that most of them, not all of them, but most of them were more on the end of the rule-breaking spectrum, right? They broke more rules than normal, but they clued in, you know, and explored that, and then decided, no, that's better than cowardice. Yeah. It's better than weakness, but it's not as good as what's good. Yeah. One of the most amazing things that I discovered this year, or stumbled upon, was I was puzzling over a line in the New Testament, which I've always been curious about because it never sat right with me. The meek shall inherit the earth. And so I was, as I said before, if you go online, Bible Hub, I think it's called, Bible Hub. It's really good for this because it contains a collection of commentaries, so you can look at a verse. And, right? You can look at a verse and other translations, multiple translations, and multiple commentators. So each verse is taken apart by many, many people. And I found out that the word meek either doesn't mean now what it meant when people first translated the text, or it was a mistranslation, either way. But because meek sounds like powerless and harmless, it's something like that, right? But what meek actually means, it's the derivation of a word, it's the translation of a word that meant something more like those who have swords and know how to use them but keep them sheathed. I thought, oh yes, that's exactly it. The world, those who have swords and know how to use them but choose to keep them sheathed will inherit the world. It's like, yes, exactly right, exactly right. Men need to be initiated in some sense to mature. They seem, because I think the reason for that is not as common among women precisely, and I think the reason for that is that biology matures women, and the responsibility that comes along with that. I think it's a built-in punch, and so, but with men, because they can delay and delay and delay, then it's necessary for society to catalyze their development. It's more necessary anyways. Time might do it, but they're not as pressured as women in all sorts of ways. And so that lack of necessity has to be replaced, apparently. This is what you derive from the anthropological literature, by a social attempt to foster maturation. And I think the best way to do that is, well, I believe that the best way to do that is through appeal to nobility in some sense, is that, you know, not only will you find meaning if you adopt responsibility, but it takes you away from that stupid suffering and shame and makes you into something that can, you know, look at itself in the mirror without grief and misery. But certainly there's no shortage of encouragement for girls and young women to take their place in the world of career, despite the fact that that's apparently a patriarchal tyranny. You know? Maybe it's not if it's run by women. I don't exactly understand the logic behind that. If you make yourself weak, life is very hard. If you make yourself weak and you suffer stupidly because of it, you will become bitter. And once you become bitter, you will become vengeful. And after vengeful, there is no limit. In the last 20 years, the constant message to young people is self-esteem, self-esteem, feel good about yourself. It's like, I don't buy that. I think that you look at yourself in the mirror and you think, I could be a hell of a lot better than I am.
Yeah.
And so, and the thing is, there's nothing more complimentary to tell a young person than that. It's like, look at you, you're a wreck. grow the hell up. There's so much more to you than you're manifesting than you can hardly imagine. It's like, well, you think that's a criticism. It's like, no, it's not. It's a great. Compliment. It's like, look at how much more you could bring out into the world. Yeah. Get your aggression under control. Strengthen yourself. Like, take on some responsibility. See if you have enough bloody courage to tell the truth. Put your life together. Stop whining. And the men eat that up because no one's ever told them that, which just breaks my heart. Yeah. It's so bad. And, you know, the boys are pulling out of everything. They're pulling out of university. They're pulling out of life. They're pulling out of marriage. Yeah. And because of that, they're more awkward and unsophisticated than they would otherwise be, and much more prone to make sexual errors. Yeah, well, it's the lost boys, like in Peter Pan, right? They're in Neverland, and they never grow up. And Peter Pan is their leader. That's the story. And it's not surprising, because it's easier to occupy yourself trivially than it is to do something difficult. So, like, there's a big tendency in that direction to begin with, because it's easier to do nothing than to take responsibility. It's easier to play games than to plan for the future. It's easier to be resentful and angry than it is to be, you know, to shoulder your vulnerability properly. And then when you add on to that, the idea that if you go out into the world and try to strive forward, that you're nothing but a predatory patriarch, then, well, it's just it's just the icing on the cake. You know, I had a friend who was like that. He pulled back from the world, and because he believed that active masculinity was a pathological force, and he poisoned himself terribly because of that. So, yeah, I've been talking to all these young guys. They come to my biblical lectures, for example, and the message is always the same. It's like, stand the hell up, get the hell out there in the world, take local responsibility, put yourself together, because there's nothing more dangerous than a weak man.